Down, the cabin door opened. Out stepped a young African president, Captain Ibrahim Traore. No suit, no tie. He wore full military gear, rifle slung over his shoulder, pistol at his side. The Kremlin runway fell silent. Flags fluttered, cameras clicked, onlookers froze. This wasn't just another leader stepping off a plane. This was a statement, a challenge to the old world order. He didn't arrive through normal diplomatic channels. He didn't come on a commercial flight or a Burkina Bay jet. He came in a special Russian aircraft, dispatched directly by the Kremlin. The Burkinabe presidency simply said, "President of the transition arrived Thursday in Moscow." But what followed was far from ordinary. From the moment he touched Russian soil, his presence stunned the world. Because this wasn't just a visit, it was history being made. No other African leader had ever appeared like this, and the message was clear. He came not as a guest, but as a partner. What signals did his presence send? Why did Russia choose him, a 36-year-old revolutionary leader who rose through a military coup, who cut ties with France, and who openly challenges neo-colonialism? The answer is simple. Because Ibrahim Traore represents a new chapter, one where Africa stops asking for permission, one where alliances are being rewritten in real time. And in Moscow, under the shadow of Red Square, this defiance was on full display. The world watched the images, but few understood what was happening behind the scenes. This was not diplomacy as usual. This was power being repositioned. From West Africa to Eastern Europe, lines are shifting, and standing at the center of it all was a young soldier president in a red beret. So ask yourself, what were the 10 shocking moments the media didn't explain? What did every step he took on that runway mean for the future of African politics? By the end of this video, you'll understand why Captain Traore is becoming the most watched African leader on the global stage, and why his visit to Moscow may mark the start of a new geopolitical era. Let's break it all down. Welcome to the world of research. Welcome to the large family of wisdom in narrations. Moment 1. Landing like a lion. On the grey morning of May 8, 2025, something unusual stirred the cold air above Moscow. President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso arrived onto Vnukovo Airport in Moscow to participate in Russia's Victory Day celebrations. He traveled aboard a Russian presidential aircraft, specifically the Ilyushin Il-96-300 with registration number RA-96019. This aircraft is part of the Russian government's VIP fleet and is typically used for transporting high-ranking officials, including President Vladimir Putin himself. The Il-96-300 is a long-range, wide-body airliner designed for intercontinental travel, offering advanced communication systems and enhanced security features. Its use for President Traore's journey underscores the strengthening diplomatic and strategic ties between Burkina Faso and Russia. The symbolism was loud, meant for Washington, Paris, and Brussels to hear. When the cabin door opened, the cameras clicked. There he was, tall, calm, dressed not in a suit, but in full olive-green military uniform. The red beret of his paratrooper regiment sat firmly on his head, a pistol at his hip. His steps were slow, controlled. He walked like a soldier, not a politician. No velvet-lined limousine waited, only the quick clicks of Russian and international press cameras. From Ouagadougou, the official note was modest. The president of the transition arrived this Thursday in Moscow. But the reality was anything but modest. Traore had arrived like a wartime leader on foreign soil, alert, armed, unshaken. He did not come to Moscow as a guest. He came as an equal. Behind this quiet theater was something deeper. In a time of escalating global tensions, when NATO and Russia eye each other across fractured lines, Vladimir Putin had chosen to fly in a 36-year-old African revolutionary, not as a courtesy, but as a signal. Burkina Faso was no longer under France's shadow. Ibrahim Traore had become a priority. His visit wasn't about a photo op, it was about power realignment. Why? Because Traore is more than a president. He is a symbol of resistance to neocolonialism, to puppet regimes, to foreign interference. In just 2 years, he has survived 18 coup plots, broken ties with France, and declared sovereignty over Burkina Faso's resources. Now he was stepping foot into Moscow, not to beg, but to build something new. A new chapter in African diplomacy, one no longer dictated by the West. His arrival was diplomatic symbolism cruising at 30,000 feet, and it sent one clear message: Africa is shifting, Traore is leading, and the world is watching. Moment 2. Uniform of defiance. Traore's clothing sent a clear message before he even said a word. He didn't wear a formal suit. Instead, he showed up in military clothes that stood for revolution. His shirt had ribbons on the chest, Burkina Faso flag badges, and shiny medals. His strong build filled out the army jacket, which had gold shoulder decorations. On one arm, he wore a red, green, and yellow band, showing pride in his country. This was the outfit of a man who took power by force and was ready to keep fighting to hold it. People noticed he even had a gun in a belt holder at his waist, something that had already made headlines when he showed up with it at a meeting in Ghana in January 2025. In Moscow, the gun showing under his jacket became a sign of how bold he was. In a world of well-dressed politicians, Traore showed up like a soldier, making it clear he wasn't there to fit in, but to stand his ground. Moment 3. The son of Africa in the crowd. As Traore stepped out onto Red Square during the big Soviet Victory Day event, people quickly gathered around him. Africans living in Russia and curious locals pushed and squeezed to catch a look at him. One pro-Russian media outlet said it clearly. Burkina Faso's President Traore drew crowds of excited Africans and foreigners in Moscow. Everyone wanted a photo with the son of Africa. Within minutes of his arrival, dozens of people were trying to shake his hand, take pictures, or put on him the black and orange St. George's ribbons that stand for Russia's victory. One moment, almost funny because of how excited people were, showed him standing calmly while a group of fans rushed to take selfies. The joy was spreading fast. Taxi drivers stopped their cars to wave, and even old Russian soldiers gave him a sharp salute and a big smile. For many people watching, this strong and down-to-earth West African captain brought something fresh and powerful to the usual Victory Day events. Moment 4. Handshakes at a Kremlin banquet. That evening, Traore sat in a special seat at a fancy Kremlin dinner. Photographers later shared a picture of a smiling Vladimir Putin shaking Traore's hand after a dinner in honor of the heads of foreign delegations attending the upcoming Victory Day celebrations. The two had met at a formal meal with old Soviet-style caviar and vodka, a big difference from the tough, basic life Traore faced back home. That night, the serious military leader became one of Putin's respected guests, sitting close to other global figures like China's Xi Jinping. The beauty and luxury of the Kremlin dining room felt worlds apart from the rough military bases in Ouagadougou, making the moment feel almost unreal. The photo of Traore and Putin raising their glasses to friendship quickly spread online, marking a new chapter in Russia-Africa ties. Moment 5. Laying a wreath of solidarity. On May 9th, Victory Day dawned under clear skies. Traore joined the procession of world leaders at the tomb of the unknown soldier in the Alexander Garden. In grim silence, he and the other presidents and prime ministers laid wreaths on the Kremlin wall. In official bulletins, He was noted to have joined world leaders at a ceremony outside the Moscow Kremlin and solemnly laid a wreath in memory of the World War II heroes. Cameras caught the scene. In front of Stalin's mausoleum and towering red square flags, Traore bowed his head with heads of state from China, Zimbabwe, and elsewhere. For Traore personally, it was a moment of historic resonance, a fellow veteran of anti-imperialist struggle paying respect to Russia's war dead, as Russian officials proudly emphasized. Moment 6. Brother leaders on parade. As the famous Victory Day military parade rumbled by in Red Square, Captain Traore stood on the reviewing stand beside Putin, Xi, Mnangagwa, Zimbabwe, Abbas, Palestine, and others. The sight of Burkinabe camouflage amid this distinguished company was widely remarked upon. Burkina's state news noted with pride that Traore walked behind the grand array of tanks and troops, witnessing as Russian soldiers marched past with T-90 tanks and Sukhoi jets overhead. When African heads were conspicuously absent, the Burkinabe presence seemed even larger. Analysts pointed out the symbolism. Here was a leader who used to be a rebellious army captain, now an honored guest among the globe's powerful. It underscored how dramatically Traore had transformed Burkina Faso's international standing, from a remote Sahel state to a visible force on Moscow's stage. Moment 7. A Russian university's royal welcome. The morning after Victory Day, Traore visited Moscow State Technological University, Mendeleev University, to give a talk, another surprise stop on his schedule.
President Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore.
He was welcomed warmly in typical Russian style. African students at the university started singing and dancing as he arrived. 2 students in uniform came forward with a traditional welcome, offering him a round piece of bread placed on a decorated cloth with a small bowl of salt. In one unforgettable photo, Traore is seen watching as the bread is handed to him, a kind gesture that has been part of Russian hospitality for hundreds of years. The official report said, African students welcomed him with songs and dances, and the university prepared bread and salt to honor his visit. It was a powerful scene, a soldier from Burkina Faso being welcomed like a hero in the middle of Russia, showing friendship through culture and tradition. Moment 8. Strategic talks in the Kremlin. Later on May 10th, Traore sat down with President Putin in the Kremlin. This was one of the most closely watched moments of the trip. Briefings had promised discussions on strategic issues between the 2 heads of state. While no formal communique was made public, insiders said the agenda included security and defense cooperation, a topic long anticipated by many observers. In fact, Reuters had reported in August 2023 that Moscow's deputy defense minister had already visited Ouagadougou to explore possible military cooperation with Traore's regime. Among the areas discussed were training of Burkinabe troops, even pilots, in Russian academies. Now, in Moscow, Traore had a chance to seal those plans over Putin's map table. Though cameras were mostly kept away, Russian press noted afterwards that the talks were held in a new, powerful dimension of cooperation, a hint at the depth of what they discussed. In fact, security cooperation was at the heart of this trip. Ahead of the visit, Russian and Burkinabe officials had quietly discussed exactly how Moscow could fill the void left by France. A Reuters report last year noted that during talks with Russian officials, Traore had explicitly laid out his wish for military aid, even asking that Burkinabe officer cadets and officers, including pilots, be trained in Russia. Now in Moscow, the expectation was that Traore would formalize such agreements. Even without official announcements, the symbolism was clear. The red star on Russian hardware paraded down Red Square was set to be mirrored by black stars on Burkinabe shoulders in the near future. Observers pointed out that meanwhile, Russian military instructors and perhaps the infamous Wagner mercenaries were rumored to be active in Burkina Faso. In short, Traore's victory lap wasn't just political theater, it was the crowning of a new defense partnership. Moment 9. Western eyes widening. Across the Atlantic, Traore's 5-day trip to Moscow raised concern and surprise. Western media and experts saw it as clear proof that Burkina Faso was now siding with Russia and moving away from its old allies. As Reuters reported earlier in 2025, Russia is trying to build closer ties with African countries, presenting itself as a friendly partner without a colonial past in Africa. In reality, that message is catching on. Burkina had already kicked out the last French soldiers in 2023 and by early 2025 joined a new group called the Alliance of Sahel States, with Mali and Niger, even leaving the West African regional group ECOWAS. For the US and France, Traore's warm welcome by Putin sent a strong warning that old partnerships were falling apart. One US expert on Africa said directly that the Soviet victory event had turned into a stage where Western power falls in shame after failed coup attempts in the Sahel, a win for Russian diplomacy over the West's longtime control. Simply put, Traore's visit was taken in Europe and the US as a clear rejection. Burkina Faso had picked Moscow over Paris, and Europe was watching without any way to stop it. Moment 10. A seat at the world table. By the end of his trip, Traore ended up in a surprising group. Photos shared on May 10th showed him standing beside President Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe, President Abbas of Palestine, and the presidents of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, all gathered under the Russian flag. In the Kremlin's official message, they were called the heads of foreign delegations, honored during Victory Day. For many people watching, the scene was unexpected. An African army captain in uniform standing confidently with leaders from Asia, the Middle East, and regions involved in long-running conflicts from the old Soviet Union. It showed the beginning of a new group of non-Western countries coming together in Red Square. Traore's black gloves and the red flags made it feel like the world's power map was changing. In that moment, the message from Moscow in 2025 was clear. Burkina Faso, a small but bold country, had claimed its spot on the world stage, standing side by side with other rising powers. Traore's fast-moving week in Moscow will be remembered for a long time. Was it a strong show of independence or a risky move? Many African watchers say it was both. He left Burkina Faso with stories to inspire his people, marching in Russian style, eating sea bass, and standing in the impressive halls of the Kremlin, showing clearly that the time of following Paris is over. At the same time, some Western experts warn that giving so much support to Russia might have a cost, becoming too dependent or facing new outside control. But everyone agrees this visit showed a high level of trust between Traore's military government and Moscow, built on their shared fight against colonial control. The pictures of Traore in Red Square have already created a clear message. Captain Traore, once a little-known African soldier, stood at the center of world politics in 2008-2025. Only time will show where this Russia-Burkina Faso relationship goes, but for now, it has clearly changed the story of the Sahel and global diplomacy on Victory Day. From this moment on, what do you think about Ibrahim Traore's achievements and his strategic plan to connect with powerful world leaders beyond Western influence? Thanks for watching. I wish you better life, foods, and money. Stay in the Big Wins family.